Bo, I'm super excited about today's talk, and I think today's excitement has to do with the title of today's talk, and that's enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is a level of, I guess, emotion or energy in what you're trying to accomplish. Can we talk about how some of our previous topics lead into the word enthusiasm and what it means?
Absolutely, David. First of all, I love the way that you've capitalized on the title of our talk today, which is enthusiasm, because I think I heard you in no less mention four words that began with E, which is a perfect segue. So, just backing up, revisiting our previous conversations on commitment and discipline with the overall theme of living the very best version of yourself. That meaning everyone has potential, but not everyone is pursuing that potential. And keep in mind, potential, if never truly realized, is simply wasted talent. So we all want to know the very best ways, and not only best ways, but practical ways that we can actually pursue our potential that will ultimately lead us to our purpose in life. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about commitment as we make our way through our alphabet. The C stood for commitment, and we decided that commitment, largely defined, is the decision that we are making on exactly where it is we want to go. Commitment was followed by discipline. So if commitment was the decision, discipline was the action. Because we could have the best laid plans in the world, but the best laid plans, if never acted upon, they're meaningless. So the C of commitment was the decision, the D of discipline was the action, which brings us to our topic today of enthusiasm, which serves as our E. Enthusiasm is the actual energy that allows us to continue in our discipline when we don't always feel like doing what it is that we've committed to doing. And we discussed last week that feelings are irrelevant. Feelings come and go. We don't always act according to our feelings. And thank goodness, because applying the whole world of endurance training, and you and I, before we got on, were talking about your training leading up to Ironman Coeur d'Alene. Well, you are at the stage where you are doing significantly longer and longer key workouts on the weekend. 80-mile bike rides, 16-mile runs. You were just in Santa Monica, and although your surroundings were picturesque, your feelings might not have always been, hey, I feel like running 20 miles today. Well, enthusiasm, again, is a matter of choice, the opposite of which would be skepticism, just an overall negative mindset about the day ahead, where enthusiasm is the actual opposite of anything that says, I don't feel like doing this today. Well, considering the fact that feelings are irrelevant, we are being guided by our commitments as evidenced by the discipline that we override, you and I as endurance athletes. And whether it's endurance athletics or it's career, it's family, it's all a matter of focus. In the moment, do we have the ability to override our feelings, our emotions? And it's absolutely necessary in order to consistently overcome even our inner skepticism, that we exercise and understand the value of enthusiasm. Because, Dave, if you think about it, your most enthusiastic moments have tended to create momentum. The first time you crossed the finish line of an Ironman triathlon, you thought, wow, I can't believe what I had just done. Now, your body had been through the training over the previous months. You had put yourself literally through hell in order to prepare for this event. But the euphoria that you experience when you cross that finish line, that's just not something that you could experience or reproduce in your training. It's in that moment where you cross that finish line, where your enthusiasm is at an all-time high. And as evidenced by the 4 other Ironman that you've completed since that first one, enthusiasm allowed you to continue to put yourself through hell to prepare for the next one. And I'm willing to bet that your second one was better than your first one, but your second one would never have been possible if you did not allow yourself to experience that enthusiasm that goes with accomplishing your goal. Because whatever gave you the idea to complete an Ironman, in the beginning, it started as a commitment. You made a decision to complete a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, and a 26.2 mile run. What the world and society in general would classify as crazy insane. And you did what it took, which is the discipline, because I'm willing to bet that along the way, there were several days where you did not feel like swimming, biking, or running. But you had the ability to override that feeling. Again, feelings are irrelevant. And on the other side of that discipline, you allowed yourself to gravitate towards enthusiasm, which explains your track record as an Ironman triathlete. Now, you and I are using the sport of triathlon as an analogy, but we all, in the grand scheme of life, experience setbacks. We all experience adversity. We all experience obstacles. It's the enthusiasm that allows us to turn our obstacles into opportunities, our adversity into advantages, and our disappointments into delights. None of that is possible without the mindset of enthusiasm. And a great way to remember the importance of this concept we're talking about today is, let's just consider the last 4 letters of the word enthusiasm, which is IASM. So if you can picture it out, spelling it on the wall, IASM simply stands for I am sold myself. Now, I don't necessarily want to go so far as to say this is the fake it till you make it mentality, but enthusiasm has a sound, and it's all based on belief. Do you believe that you have the discipline, as we discussed last night, to turn your commitment into a reality? Which is why we're discussing the importance of being energized along the way by taking on the mindset of enthusiasm.
Now, the base of enthusiasm is that energy and that mindset, and sometimes it's hard to keep that fire going, whether it's the commitment you've already previously made to follow through on your goals, and then even the discipline to take the action to do so. How do you maintain this level of enthusiasm and energy? Because the first thing that comes to mind is mindset. You have to have a strong mindset to maintain a certain level of enthusiasm, which takes energy.
Well, so that's a great point, and just to elaborate on the importance of mindset, there are 2 opposite extremes that most of the world can relate to as far as mindset is concerned. And on one end, you have the scarcity mindset, which carries the belief that you were born with all the ability / talent that you will ever assume. And because you have a limited amount, you are a little hesitant to pursue any wild, big-eyed dreams that are outside the friendly confines of your comfort zone. So the scarcity mindset is definitely not one that you and I, or hopefully our listeners, can relate to. Whereas on the opposite end of the extreme, we have what's known as the abundance mentality, which simply says, if you find yourself being the smartest person in the room, you have done yourself a tremendous disservice. Because the abundance mentality is there is always more for the taking. Dave, you and I have discussed the value of advice, but just offering this up to our greater listening audience is that the very best thing that you and I can do, and that everyone can do for that matter, is to surround themselves with people that they and we admire, that we trust, that are simply further down the path of life, or simply the path that we want to direct ourselves in, and simply stop and ask, hey, based on your past experience over the last 6 months, over the last year, Dave, we've also discussed, I'm about to be a dad. I've never done that before. So what am I doing? I'm talking to as many fathers of infants that I can possibly talk of, and simply asking them the question, based on everything you've learned since the time your children were born to the time that we're talking now, what would the present version of yourself tell the brand new father of 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago? So the abundance mindset simply communicates the fact that I am not only willing, but I am enthusiastic about learning, because nothing in life is good or bad except by comparison. And so if I have no experience in a particular area, the only way that my mind can think to gain that experience is not to read about in a book, not to research it and study it, till there's no time left in the day, but it's just simply to stop and ask, based on your past experience, if you were me and had it to do all over again, how would you advise me to proceed in the discipline that it's going to take to close the deal on the commitment that I made to be a new father, to finish an Ironman in less than 9 hours, to provide a certain amount of income every single year for my family, whatever the goal may be. The enthusiasm is what is absolutely necessary to keep your head in the game when you don't always feel like doing it, because we're all human, we're all prone to negative influences, and thanks to the media, we're reminded on average, and this is mind-boggling, I actually read a report this week that today, compared to 1945, our average hourly consumption of media has gone from 4.8 hours in 1945 to 9.8 hours today. Dave, we are told over 360 times a day that we don't have this, that we need this from our traditional media channels, being TV, radio, internet, newspaper, and magazine. So in order for us to be able to tune that media out, it's a matter of carrying that enthusiasm, because keep in mind, positive news isn't necessarily a best-selling. We always want to hear about that juicy negative scandal that happened so we can spread that gossip. Well, that does us no favors when it comes to discipline, and it certainly doesn't put us in an opportunity to keep the commitments that are most important to us. Rather, enthusiasm is what will provide us with the energy to stay on that path of the straight and narrow that will lead us ultimately to where we want to go. Because once we arrive at where we want to go is when we truly reached the purpose of our creation, which is to simply turn around and share that with others. Because there is no such thing as original knowledge. Everything that has been gained has been shared by those that have gone before us. Enthusiasm is what keeps us in the game when every fiber of our being says stop, says quit, says I can't take it anymore.
As we kind of recap here in the next couple of minutes, I think this is something you would endorse, is that when you do get off track and you lose that energy of enthusiasm, it's good to circle back around and either on your list that you've written down somewhere and remind yourself of the commitment you've made and the discipline that's necessary to fulfill that commitment. So if you can kind of wrap this up on how those all tie together, and if you do lose some of that momentum of enthusiasm, it's important to come back and have a reminder, even if it's with yourself or someone you get that advice from.
No question. And Dave, that's a great question just to conclude our time together is that not only is it important that you realize it, but it's important that you recognize that it's a reality. The fact is, your plans are not always going to go according to plan. As you move closer and closer to your potential, which simply is what we call the pursuit, rather than just sitting on your hands listening to other people tell you how you should do something, how you should change careers, how based on as fast as you run, you should do a marathon. Well, if you never make that decision yourself to pursue your potential that the world is informing you of, you will never arrive at the purpose that you were created. But in the interim, it's ever so important that not only you understand that pain is going to occur the minute you start to pursue that potential, but that it is inevitable. And so not only that you realize it, but you plan for it. So, and again, in the context of your race, your triathlon race in Coeur d'Alene that happens roughly 5 weeks from now, even though you've done it 3 times and you know the course like the back of your hand, something inevitably is going to happen that's going to throw you off, that's going to take you for surprise. And rather than being completely thrown off your plan, which when we're surprised by adversity, we tend to react in less than ideal circumstances. And you think about the general concept of decision making. You know, Dave, I'd like to ask you to picture just a pendulum that swings at 2 opposite ends between fear and greed, which are the 2 primary emotions that we consider when making important decisions in our life. You think back over your life at the most important decisions you've made. The best ones were probably at a standstill, at the bottom where you are completely objective, where fear or greed have no impact on the decision that takes place. You've had time to think about it. Well, as opposed to making a harsh, on-the-spot decision when you're fearful or when you're greedy. Those tend to work out, well, let's just say not so good all the time. So when it comes to the pain that you're going to experience, it's important that you tell yourself, hey, as I get closer to realizing my potential, pain is simply a sign or an indication that I'm on the right track. And the way that I keep myself committed to the discipline that I've decided ahead of time is to practice enthusiasm. It's the same way that you need a gel or a goo at mile 20 on the run of an Ironman triathlon. Your body is going to shut down if you do not take in that energy. Well, as much as we want anything in life that we currently don't have, if we're pursuing that want, or it could be a need, and we do not stop to remind ourselves of the value or the reason that we're pursuing that, and that reason, that value, that energy is enthusiasm. Again, it's I am sold myself, at least to the extent that I'm telling myself internally that no matter how much this hurts, I'm keeping my perspective long-sighted and I'm picturing in my mind the result. Because on the other side of the discipline that I've committed to is the purpose of my passion.
Bo Parrish, another excellent talk, and today's topic has been enthusiasm. Great job. Thank you.
Dave, thank you, sir.